Hi everybody, welcome back. I hope you're doing really well. Feeling a little England in my outfit, but I actually love this. I found it in my drawer this morning and I thought I don't wear that enough, so I thought I would wear it today. I posted a little mini book review, books I love video on TikTok yesterday, and it made me think I should sit down and do like a full in-depth long one because it's been a long time since I have spoken about books. I've mentioned a few in favourites here and there, but I'm going to go through them all. Warn you, it will probably be a long one because there's a lot of books that I love. I'm going to get straight into it. I'm going to try and do this semi-methodically. That may all go out the window, but first up, I've got a few series that I love. Same writer, that kind of thing. You've probably seen me talk about these before. I've definitely mentioned them in favourites somewhere. These are Jennifer Saint's books. Jennifer Saint replied to my story once on Instagram, and I don't think I've ever fangirled quite so hard in my life. Whenever anyone asks me what book to read, I always direct them to this series. There is one other, which is Hera. I don't think I've read that one because it was in hardback when I wanted it, and I'm at my wit's end with hardback books. Honestly, I am. But once it comes out in paperback, I will definitely get that. Electra, in particular, is my favourite. I would say this is one of my favourite books ever. I actually really want to reread it because I loved it so much. This made me cry like a baby. It takes a lot for a book to really have me like bawling my eyes out. I think we sort of roughly know the stories. There's like mentions of other Greek gods, goddesses throughout the book. The way that she writes about these women, they could literally be women living today. That's what I love about it so much. Like, you really feel for them. You view them as human beings rather than these like gods and goddesses. Are heartbreaking but absolutely beautiful. I adore these books. I love them so much. I also think this would be a really good way back into reading if you're in like a bit of a reading slump and you're not sure where to start. These are gripping, they're beautifully written, and also educational. I feel like I know a lot more about Greek mythology now. Not only is this my favourite book, but the cover, I mean all of them are just gorgeous. This is a very special book. Very special book. I love it. Another series I absolutely adore is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. There is a red one, which is actually the first book in the series, but I have no idea where that is. These are the three that I have. These are the last three, not in order. That's in order. Should be a red one there, then that would be the full set. Richard Osman to me is what Sarah J Maas is to everybody else. I love this man. I would read anything that he writes. This series in particular is heartwarming, sad, so funny, so beautiful. It's just the most perfect series ever. I know a lot of people love this, but I want more people to read it because a lot of people I think are a bit put off by it. It was actually kind of fluke that I read the first book in this series. I was on holiday end of last year with my mum in Greece, and I just like raced through the book that I brought with me. And they had some books that people had like left behind in the reception of the hotel. I had like 3 days left there, so I was like, well, I need to read something. Picked up the first one of this series. I literally read it in like 2 days. I've never been so obsessed with a book in my life. I ordered the next one while I was like sitting on the sunbed. I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the characters. It's so amazing how he writes from the perspective of like pensioners, and he does it so perfectly. Each character is so perfectly like developed. They're so warm. You honestly feel like you know each and every one of them. There's none that are kind of like background character. You just fall in love with all of them. Joyce in particular is my favourite. She's so cute. Yeah, I love this series to bits. The second book in particular, this is my absolute favourite. I think it's the last chapter in this that links back to the name of the book, and it literally is like stab in the heart. Made me cry. It's just so clever. The way that he writes is so smart. There'll be loads of little things throughout it that you think, that links back to the other ones. He's just the most talented writer ever. Him and Jennifer Saint are like my two favourite writers ever. I love this so much. Even talking about them, I'm like, I want to reread these. I want to experience this for the first time again. It's so good. Annoyingly, the last one is hardback, but I could not resist. As soon as I finished the third one, I was like, I need the fourth one. This had just come out, I think, when I bought it. So I had to do what I had to do. I can't wait until like next year for a paper. Obviously, it's being made into a series soon. So is it a series or a film? I can never really understand what anyone's saying about that. What I've seen of like the cast so far kind of looks like what I would think. So I'm really hoping it's gonna be amazing because it's the most heartwarming thing ever. The series that I have to talk about is The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. I love this series so much. I would put this up there in similar realm to Jennifer Saint's books to me. The way that she writes is quite similar. They're all very female character based. The main character Amara, which I love that name so much, I actually might reserve that for like a future baby name because as soon as I saw that name I was like, oh, Amara is such a beautiful name. I love the way you would write that as well. I always think about how you would write names. Anyway, I digress. Been sold into slavery after the death of her dad, and it follows the women in this brothel and who owns the brothel and runs the girls. It's obviously awful, so it's very sad and heavy in that way. I love the women in it, the sisterhood, the way a few of them get out, some of them stay, and it kind of gradually moves through her life throughout the 3 books. No spoilers, because it does actually say this on the back of the second one, but she escapes her life in the brothel. The second one is very much about getting out of a situation and it's still haunting you, it's still following you and kind of being who you are. I would say what her and also Jennifer Saint are really good at is creating like a world without it being really like fantasy, mappy, showing you all the world, you know. They just create a really immersive world that you kind of understand every little detail of. I think it's very subconscious, but like everything is explained in so much detail without being over wordy, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I can picture the house, I can picture the brothel, I can see it all without it being like really spelled out to you, if that makes sense. This is a beautiful series. Again, if you want to get into reading and you're not sure where to start, give this one a go, see what you think. I'm sure that you would fall in love with it because it's amazing. They're the series that I really love. I'm not a big series reader girl. I think I'm not very into like fantasy, so those big series just put me off. I'm Akatar's biggest hater. Could go into it in heavy detail, but I will not. So I've got 2 books. These are kind of similar kind of vibes for me, so I'm going to pair them together. First up, we've got Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. I hope I'm saying that right. I actually first found her on YouTube. She used to be a mortician, or maybe is still a mortician, I'm not sure. But she makes YouTube videos about crematoriums. I know some people find this stuff really gross and like heavy and just don't want to know, but I'm so intrigued. Like, I'm interested to a fault about things like this. She's written a few other books, which I have read, but this is the best one. I love this so much. About her experiences as a mortician, the families that she meets, little stories. She is the funniest woman. Like the way that she makes this subject so lighthearted and so funny. She has another book which is called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, and it's about like questions about like death, but I think that kids have asked, or it's in a way that like you could read it to kids and it makes sense. She obviously knows her shit and she's super clever, but the way she applies it is really lighthearted. Like this book will make you laugh way more than you think that it should. A few of my family have read this who I wouldn't say are like necessarily into this topic, and they've really enjoyed it, so give it a chance. Hear me out. Next up is The Trauma Cleaner. This follows the life of Sandra Pankhurst, who of course is a trauma cleaner. She goes to crime scene cleanups, people who've died in their homes. Again, I find this side so interesting, but actually the story of her life is so incredible as well. She's a trans woman, which I actually feel like they didn't touch on until a little bit later on, which I loved. They were kind of just letting her story roll and then kind of brought it in when it made sense, rather than it being like the big part of it, you know. But what an amazing woman. Like, after reading this, I was just researching her non-stop and I'm just in awe of her. The impact that she has on the people's lives in this book is incredible. A friend actually recommended this to me and I can't believe that I don't see more people talk about it. But I actually am going to reread this because I loved it so much. I read it a few years ago now, and I remember how moving I found it, but I can't remember all the details of it, but I know I absolutely loved it. My mum also read this and she loved it. It's one of those books you will just devour. Like, I think I read this in like 2 days. Under 260 pages, so actually quite an easy short read, but the contents is incredible. Now, I've got 2 books by my favourite girly whirlies that need to be mentioned. Emily Ratajkowski, My Body, and Julia Fox, Down the Drain. I put these 2 together because I feel like they just should be. They're the Bibles of life. So, My Body, I've actually got a signed one. I know. Quite fancy of me. I also met Emily last year in New York, and she was the nicest person I've ever met in my life. You know when you already like somebody and then you meet them and they're really nice and it kind of like solidifies the love that you have for them. So now I feel like we're best friends and I love this book even more than I did. There's a lot of mixed reviews on this book, which actually kind of makes me like it more because it's kind of the whole fucking point that she was saying. A lot of people have said like, oh, she's so beautiful, what's she got to worry about? I'm like, did you actually read the book? Because that's kind of what she's saying the whole time. I love that she really addresses her privilege throughout the entire thing. I kind of like that it almost feels like her like internal monologue rather than it being like a really polished, perfect book. I think it's very like her toying with the idea of like, this is what made me famous, but it kind of broke me and it kind of hurt me, but people love me for it. And I think you can feel her kind of like toying between the two the whole way through, which I love. I think it's very honest. It's just a collection of essays. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. I think this is one of those books you could go back to at different points in your life and read it in a completely different way. So, Down the Drain, Julia Fox, again, I would put these 2 very close. Pretty much everything that I've said about My Body, you could also say about this. What an insane life, what a woman. I'm obsessed with Julia Fox. Every single thing that she says, I'm like, yes. I feel like I didn't know a great deal about her before I read this book. I'd kind of seen the pictures of her visually. I was obsessed with when you actually dig deeper into her. Like, the story behind her is insane. She has lived like 100 lives in one life. I absolutely love an autobiography. There's something so interesting about them. I think I'm just nosy, to be honest, and I just want to know everything about people's lives. Growing up, I would always read people's autobiographies. I think they were some of the first books that I read. I remember reading Talisa's autobiography. I believe it was called The Female Boss, and if it wasn't, that would be a waste. So I think it was called that. She's just a powerhouse of a woman. I'm so obsessed with her. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I've spoken about this book so many times. This is one of my favourites ever. I actually got a tattoo for it My friend did a little coffee cup on me because I love it so much. I went through a stage of reading like exclusively Japanese translated books, and it was probably my favorite era of like reading. I just remember being into every single book that I read at that point. I'd never have any that I was a bit like, One has always been the most special one for me. This has a very, very special place in my heart, this book. It's just so beautiful. I love the sentiment behind it as well. That's kind of why I got the tattoo. I think everybody struggles to be in the moment, be present, and actually enjoy what you have right now. The whole message of like enjoying life before the coffee gets cold, because it's such a short window and everything is so fleeting. Japanese translations are just so beautiful. The words that they use, everything is so descriptive, which actually reminds me of this one that I wanted to mention. This is Strange Weather in Tokyo. The description of everything, like the description of the food, the drink, the lighting, like everything is so immersive and so visual. This is obviously set in Tokyo, and I feel like you can really feel like the richness of Tokyo, like what they're eating, the restaurants they're in, like everything feels really warm and really like cozy and close. It's really weird, it's hard to explain, but I know what I mean. If you feel like you're just reading the same kind of books and you're kind of bored and you're in a bit of a rut, I would definitely give some Japanese books a go. They're just so warm. There's something really, really special about Japanese books, so I love them too. This section I would call holiday reads, but for interesting people. Does that mean? I love a Colleen Hoover as much as the next person. That for me would be a real holiday read, like a Colleen Hoover. These are for, you're on holiday but you still want something a little bit stimulating, you know? I'm gonna try and whiz through these because there's A Man Who Didn't Call. This is a real like page turner, what I would describe as like actually being kind of thrilling without being too like dun. Very gripping. I read this one really fast. I think this would be a really good holiday read. It's not too like taxing, but you'll be into it. This is such a me quote on the front. I absolutely loved this book. And what more do you need? Someone did say unputdownable, which I would say is very true. This I would say is quite similar to The Man Who Didn't Call. This is the love of my life. Think Channel 5 film, but more interesting and more developed. That's what I would explain this as. I really enjoyed this. Again, unputdownable. Basically, her husband is an obituary writer and he starts looking into his wife to start writing her obituary because she's ill. And he starts realising she's just been chatting shit the whole time. She's not who she said she was. They've got a dog, they've got a house, they've got a kid, and he has no idea who his wife is. So he starts kind of looking into her, unravelling the truth. Again, very twisty-turny, but so good. That feeling where you're really excited to like get home and get in bed and read your book. I had that with this, and I haven't had that in a long time, so I want that back. This one of the most fuzzy, warm, heart-feeling books I've ever read. This is The Keeper of Lost Things. I've never seen anybody else talk about this book, and I love it so much. Characters actually remind me quite a bit of the Thursday Murder Club characters, that really warm, you just want to give them a hug, like you never want anyone to be mean to them ever kind of character. And it's very different to anything I've ever read. I've never read a book that was anything like this. The story is so unique, it's so different. It's just one of those really good standalone books that you'll think about for a long time after you read it. I want to reread all of these. I need to take like a month off and just go on like a reading retreat. This is Things We Do Not Tell the People We Love. This is a collection of stories about relationship, like romantic, family, friendship, all of it. This would be a really good holiday read, or if you're someone who doesn't want to like commit to a really intense book. It's loads of just short stories, so it's quite easy to pick up and drop. And in here, called The Jam Maker, that's it. This is my favourite story in the whole book. I love this. A few of them are really sad. It's kind of like makes you feel fuzzy and it makes you want to hug everyone that you know, but this is a really great book. I only got 3 more, okay? We're doing well. Crying in H Mart. I love this book so much. This deserves so much praise. And I think it did get quite a lot of praise. It is a beautiful book. So I didn't actually know about this writer, but she's a singer and guitarist who creates dreamy, inspired indie pop under the name Japanese Breakfast. So if you know Japanese Breakfast, this is her. It's kind of it is a memoir. I don't know if it's necessarily written as like a biography of what happened. I think it's more of like a developed story of what happened, if that makes sense. All about grief, heaviness, crying in H Mart, basically it just hitting you when you're out and about and you're not expecting it. I think if you're going through grief and you feel ready to read about it, this would be a really, really good book to read. But this is the only book I've ever read by her. I don't know if she's written any other books or if this was just like a one done. I seem to really enjoy books that centre around food. I recently started Butter. It's such a big book. It's like that big, so I'm kind of struggling to get through it. I do really like books that centre around food, and this is about food and grief. The two just link together perfectly. It makes so much sense. A bit of a sad one, but really amazing. I feel like I had to mention it. This is one of those books that I also think about quite a lot. Okay, The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath. I have to mention this. It's in like my top 5 books ever. More probably in like a historical context. The things I love about this book are not necessarily the storyline. I do enjoy it, but it's not my favourite things. My favourite things are the fact this was written in, when was it? 1963. And when you read it, it could be written today. This book contains one of my favourite like passages of writing ever about the fig tree. Also links back to The Midnight Library, which is another book that I absolutely love, but I did borrow that off my boyfriend, so I don't have that physically, but that's another book that I absolutely love. And The Midnight Library references the fig tree from Sylvia Plath, the bell jar. Obviously she wrote that in the 60s, and I feel like when you read that as a woman today, you're like, oh my god, it's just as relevant now as it was then. Like the generational feelings of women have really not changed very much, and I love that. Even if you just read the fig tree part alone, I think as a poem, I think it's one of the best bits of writing ever, I will say, because it's so powerful and it's so strong, and the way it came from her mind. This is a woman who put her head in the oven, sadly. I love like a historically mad woman. It's very Tortured Poets, you know? It's one that I think everybody should have in their collection. Everyone should read at some point in their life. It's such a classic, but it's so, so good and so relevant today. This is the most recent book that I finished. This is Bellies. Very gritty, very English. It's about a couple who meet, fall in love, and then one of them starts to transition. It's about all the heaviness that comes with that. I love how gritty they kept this. It explores a lot of how people actually feel in that situation. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and you're becoming yourself, and this is great. It's a lot about grief and about the person who is kind of left behind, how you process things like this, and still being in love with someone and trying to like navigate that. I just think it's so raw, it's so beautiful. I actually read this on holiday and it was making me really sad. I probably would not read this by a Paul. We must both ask if it is worth losing a part of themselves or each other to become the people they want to be. Feels a little bit doomed from the start for me. Like they're two people that obviously love each other very much, but there's so many reasons that they just cannot be together, and it kind of follows the separate lives that they take in like becoming themselves and realizing who they are. It's very bittersweet. Like I actually love a story that doesn't have like a happy ending, because I just don't think it ever really happens. I think they love each other, they couldn't be together. Such is life. Chapter 22 in this is really, really sad. Very heartbreaking. I would warn you for chapter 22. That's when I was bawling my eyes out. Amazing. Again, massive book hangover after this. I was like, where do you go from reading this? The writer of this also commented on my Instagram reel. I had a little fangirl. She's like a fucking supermodel as well. I went on her page and she's like the most insane, gorgeous being ever, and she can write like this. Save some for the rest of us, love. I'm just looking through my books highlight on Instagram because I feel like I've probably forgotten things. I keep a lot of my books in the loft because I never want to get rid of books if I love them. Any that I actually don't like, I give to charity shops, but my dream is one day to have like a massive bookcase, library kind of room, so I never want to get rid of anything. But I just can't keep them all down here. Oh, Madeline Miller books. That's a shout. I don't have any of them. I think I've actually lent those out to people and never got them back. But that's okay. I love them anyway. I'm willing to share. Madeline Miller, Song of Achilles, Circe. I never really feel like I'm saying that right, no matter which way I go for it. They're actually the first kind of Greek mythology books that I read, and then it was like a gateway to Jennifer Saint from there. Madeline Miller's books are gorgeous, like absolutely stunning. Girls, this was one that I wanted to mention. God, my nails looked very nice there as well. I've lent this to my sister probably a year ago. I think she's read like 5 pages of it. That's a great book by Emma Cline. It's about cults. I love a cult book. I love a cult girl group book. Something about it is very interesting to me. That's an amazing book. I've actually ordered a book that should be coming today. This was a recommendation I saw on Faye Ellaby's Instagram. Bright Young Women. This is arriving today, so this will be my next read. Yeah, there are a few books that I don't have. I'm looking at my bookshelf now. I've pretty much cleared it. So yeah, I kind of just keep the books down here that I really love and things that I will probably go back and read. Anything that I wouldn't necessarily reread goes in the loft. I'm a bit of a hoarder with books, like I never want to get rid of them, so one day I will have a massive bookshelf and I'll be able to have everything displayed in front of me, but until then they're safely packed away. And there we go. They are my favourite books, books that I absolutely love, books that I think are very special, things that I think you would enjoy. I will leave a list of all of them. I also have a Goodreads account, so I'll link that down below as well, because that's got everything that I've read and kind of like star ratings, so like a rough whether I liked it or not. Goodreads is so good, by the way. I love Goodreads. The visuals of it could be a little bit nicer, but the actual premise of the app is very good. I found a lot of new books to read on there. Thank you so much for watching this video and thank you for being here as always. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it wasn't too long. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day wherever you are, and I will see you all very soon. Love you.